What's up, Dons? Welcome to the lecture on Chapter 20, Section 2, Normalcy and Isolation. So, in this lecture, we're going to understand the causes of post-war isolationism, and the essential question we'll be asking is why did the American people respond to Harding and a return to normalcy? So, keep in context what has just happened in American history. We just finished up Chapter 19, which talked about World War I, a war that we begrudgingly got ourselves into and became involved in international affairs. It cost us a lot of money. It totally changed how our society viewed war. It cost tens of thousands of lives, and it created a bitter debate domestically here in the United States on what our role internationally should be moving forward. So, with the election of 1920, you have neither the Democrats or Republicans really identifying a very strong candidate. And eventually, Warren G. Harding, a Republican senator from Ohio, defeats James Cox by a wide margin in the 1920 election. Now, what's important about this is Harding's campaign slogan was a, quote, return to normalcy, which means basically a return to the conservative values America held so dear for so long. If you remember, early in the 20th century, early 1900s, we have a huge outbreak of the progressive movement and progressive fervor. People wanting to expand the power of the people locally, on the state level, and on the federal level, to overthrow corrupt politicians and corrupt business practices. Well, all of that was well and good, but what that led to, in many Americans' minds, was too much of an idealistic view of not only the United States, but also of the world. An idealistic view of the power of the United States of America internationally, what we could accomplish, and really just how important we were. And following World War I, the rejection of the League of Nations, and the rejection of many of the 14 points here at home, the American people had become disillusioned with these progressive ideas and thought that these are the types of ideas that got us involved in the war in the first place. Harding promises a return to this normalcy, a world with peace, stability, very importantly, conservatism and isolationism. Moving forward, Harding promises to keep the United States of America out of international politics and focus on the domestic issues here in the United States, rebuilding a strong America that can defend itself without having to get involved in any foreign conflicts. In order to prevent foreign conflicts in the future, the United States signs the Kellogg-Briand Pact. This flies in the face of the militarism we saw prior to World War I, where basically the major tool of diplomacy was war. The Kellogg-Briand Pact has the United States of America and many other leading countries around the world come together and agree not to use war as an instrument of diplomacy. World War I was stated by Woodrow Wilson to be the war to end all wars, and many Americans and people around the world recognized that they wanted this to be the case. In addition to not wanting to get involved in issues around the world, the United States of America during World War I recognized just how displeased they were with the rising immigration in the United States. And immigration quotas are enforced from foreign countries. These quotas limit the amount of immigrants from specific countries to an actual percentage, usually the percentage of their population. And so it had real-life numbers attached to how many immigrants could come from certain countries. Now, this return to nativism and this racism is not entirely surprising following a world war in which Americans think we should not have been involved, and our foreign entanglements were a big reason for it. Additionally, during the war, many of the immigrants from the various countries who were fighting in the war were very outspoken about who they supported, whether it be the Allied powers or the Central powers, especially prior to the United States' involvement. And this turned many other Americans away from supporting immigration in the future. One last thing about the immigration quotas to keep in mind, these quotas banned all immigrants from Japan. And Japan was really annoyed with this because back in 1907, they worked out an agreement with Teddy Roosevelt called the Gentleman's Agreement, in which they would limit their own immigration. And they felt like they had lived up to that promise. And so this will create a long-lasting resentment between the Japanese and the United States of America moving forward. Now, Harding's ideas of returning to normalcy worked for a while. He was a pretty popular guy. People liked him. He was viewed as someone who just looked like he should be president. He was a great speaker, very captivating. But he, like other presidents before him, has been was downfelled with scandal. And this one was the Teapot Dome scandal. And Teapot Dome is a town in Wyoming, and it was a town that was set aside during the progressive conservation movement of land not to be used for business practices. Well, this land had a lot of oil in it. And Harding's Secretary of the Interior, Albert Fall, leases this oil-rich land to oil companies, knowing that these oil companies would then personally give him a kickback. He's using his job as Secretary of the Interior to take advantage of the power it's giving him and using that to profit personally off of it. Of course, anytime an employee gets in trouble, especially publicly, his boss is the one that looks bad. And Harding looked really bad here. Eventually the story will break and Harding will travel to Alaska, where he will have a heart attack and he will die. His Vice President Calvin Coolidge becomes president. Coolidge separates himself quite well from this scandal and isn't hurt by it too much. He runs for election in 1924, and then he is actually elected. So next time we pick up with politics, Calvin Coolidge will be the President of the United States. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask the history teacher.